Sarah Miller left home that morning more rushed than ever. Chicago was bustling, with sirens blaring and heavy traffic filling the streets. The city was beginning to brace itself for winter, and the biting winds stung her skin, reminding her she was running late. As she hurried toward the office, she decided she could save a few minutes by grabbing a coffee to warm up. It was, after all, part of her daily routine. A hot coffee, always from the same corner cafe, followed by a quick dash to work. Rounding the corner onto the main street, she noticed a small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Curious, Sarah moved closer, and her heart started racing when she realized what was happening. In the middle of the sidewalk, a tall man in a suit was lying collapsed, apparently unconscious. His skin looked pale, almost gray, and he wasn't responding to the calls of the few people trying to help him. Acting on instinct, Sarah knelt down beside the man. She tried to get some response, a word, a sign that he was conscious, but there was nothing. "Please, someone call an ambulance," she urged, gently supporting his head. Anxiety and concern flooded her as she felt an odd sense of responsibility to keep him safe until help arrived. A few minutes later, the sound of an ambulance siren echoed down the street, and the paramedics arrived, taking over his care. Sarah felt a brief wave of relief, but something in her heart told her she couldn't just walk away. When the paramedics asked if anyone would accompany him to the hospital, she volunteered. There was something about this stranger that made her feel she shouldn't leave him. Even without knowing him, Sarah sensed he needed her. On the way to the hospital, watching the unconscious man on the stretcher, Sarah wondered who he was, what he did, and if anyone was waiting for him. Judging by his expensive watch and well-tailored suit, it was clear he was someone of means. Maybe he's an important businessman, a family man, she thought, and the mix of worry and curiosity kept her alert throughout the trip. Upon arriving at the hospital, she was informed that he'd suffered a heart attack. The attending doctor praised her quick actions, mentioning that her swift intervention might have saved the man's life. Sarah felt a deep sense of relief, mixed with an indescribable emotion. She was glad to have been useful, but also felt a strange connection to this stranger, as if fate had somehow intertwined their paths at that unexpected moment. After a brief conversation with the medical team, Sarah decided to wait at the hospital for a while. She sat in the cold, narrow corridor, watching nurses and doctors rush by. She lost track of time, her mind full of thoughts about what had just happened. After spending a few hours at the hospital, Sarah realized she needed to get to work. Running late, but with a heart a little more at ease knowing the man was receiving proper care, she left the hospital and hurried her steps. It was already late, and as she crossed Chicago's busy streets, she rehearsed a possible explanation to give her boss, Mr. Thompson. Walking into the office, she noticed the disapproving look from the receptionist and the murmurs among some colleagues, signaling that something was off. As soon as she reached her desk, she was summoned to the boss's office. She took a deep breath, hoping Mr. Thompson would understand her situation. When she opened the office door, she was met with a cold, severe look. "Sarah, you know I don't tolerate lateness," Mr. Thompson began bluntly with an impatient expression. She tried to explain, telling him what had happened, but he shook his head, clearly unimpressed. "I'm not interested in your excuses. I need someone committed to the job, not someone who disappears without notice," he declared, cutting the conversation short. Sarah felt the ground drop from under her when she heard the words, "You're fired." She left his office in shock, feeling a deep pain mixed with a sense of injustice. Her tear-filled eyes and heavy heart accompanied her as she gathered her few belongings. She'd lost her job for trying to save someone. In that moment, Sarah didn't know what hurt more, losing her job or Mr. Thompson's lack of compassion, his complete disregard for what she had done. Back on the cold streets of Chicago, Sarah could feel the biting wind cutting across her face, mirroring her current situation. Jobless, with no immediate prospects, her worries grew, and she started to wonder if she had made the right choice by helping that stranger that morning. Her mind oscillated between regret and resignation, but deep down, she knew she couldn't have acted any differently. Saving that man's life had been the right thing to do. In the days that followed, Sarah felt increasingly lost. Money began to tighten, and the fear of not being able to pay her bills soon became a constant worry. The uncertainty of the future haunted her, and her dreams of building a career in Chicago seemed to be gradually falling apart. Yet something compelled her to keep visiting the hospital. The man was still there, and Sarah started to feel that by visiting him, she found a bit of peace amidst the whirlwind of emotions and doubts surrounding her. At the hospital, Sarah spent most of her time by the man's bedside, holding his hand or quietly reading a book out loud. She still didn't know much about him. His name was Michael Reed, as a nurse had told her, but the details of his life remained a mystery. All she knew was that he was still unconscious, fighting to recover from a heart attack. During those visits, Sarah felt an unexpected connection to Michael, as if something inexplicable tied their stories together. Her presence there was not only a way to ease her own loneliness and anxiety, but also a means to find purpose amidst the difficulties. Day after day, she returned to the hospital, drawing strength from that place where life and fragility existed side by side. One day, while holding Michael's hand, Sarah whispered, "I hope you wake up soon. There's so much I'd like to tell you." She knew he might not be able to hear her, but the act of confiding in him brought her some comfort, and so she kept coming back, feeling that her daily visits were helping them both. Weeks passed, and with them, Sarah's hope of finding a new job began to fade. The city, once full of promise, now felt unforgiving. Chicago, the place she had once dreamed of making her home, was turning into a bitter reminder of her setbacks and disappointments. Her savings dwindled, and the bills piled up. Amidst this tide of hardship, a troubling idea began to form. Maybe it was time to give up and return to her hometown, where at least her family could support her. On one of the coldest days of winter, Sarah decided to visit Michael one last time before leaving. She felt she needed to say goodbye to this man, even if he still had no idea who she was. As she entered the hospital, she noticed Michael's room was quiet, softly lit by the fading light of late afternoon. The machines hummed steadily, and the air felt heavy, as if every particle carried the weight of her farewell. Sitting beside him, Sarah began to speak softly, unsure if her words made any sense. "Michael, I know you can't hear me, but I want you to know that it was a pleasure to take care of you during this time. Even though we don't know each other, you've been an important part of my life in your own way. I lost my job, went through tough times, but somehow coming here every day gave me the strength to keep going. You were like a friend I didn't know I had." With each word, her heart felt lighter, as if she were leaving part of her pain and disappointment there by Michael's side. Deep down, Sarah knew she needed to move on, to keep going. She was about to stand up, but paused, whispering, "Thank you for crossing my path, even if it was in such an unexpected way. I hope you recover soon and find happiness wherever life takes you. Goodbye, Michael." She left the room feeling torn between the sadness of saying goodbye and the need for a fresh start. That night, back in the small apartment she'd soon leave behind, Sarah began packing her things. The open suitcase on the bed seemed to symbolize everything she had lived through in Chicago. Dreams carefully stored away now, with the hope of better days somewhere else. A few days later, just as she was about to box up the last item, there was a knock at the door. Confused and unsure who would come by at that hour, Sarah slowly opened the door, and what she saw left her speechless. Standing before her, with a slightly pale face but eyes bright with vitality, was Michael Reed, the man she had saved. He watched her with a gentle expression, and Sarah felt a mix of shock and joy. Her hands trembled as she took in those eyes, which for the first time were looking directly at her. "Sarah, right?" he asked, his voice a bit raspy but steady. She nodded, still unable to speak. Michael took a deep breath and continued, I heard that you stayed by my side all that time, and I came here to thank you." Michael's words left her even more bewildered. He had heard, but how? With each passing second, Sarah's curiosity and emotion grew. "How did you—" she began, but he interrupted her with a faint smile. "It was strange," Michael explained. "While I was unconscious, there were moments I could hear a voice. It felt like a dream, but I heard you, what you said. All of it gave me strength to keep fighting even though I didn't know who you were. When I woke up and the doctors mentioned the woman who saved my life, I knew I had to find you." Michael's words resonated deeply within Sarah. She felt embarrassed but also moved, as if fate itself had paved the way for them to meet. She managed a shy smile. "I just did what felt right," she replied, trying to keep her emotions in check. Michael looked at her with a grateful expression. "I'd like to repay you for what you did for me if you'll allow it. Beyond your company while I was recovering, you saved my life, and I think there's still a lot for us to talk about." He paused before continuing, "I have a proposal for you." Sarah's heart raced as she tried to process everything happening, but curiosity won out, and she encouraged him to go on. "I'd like you to work with me," Michael said in a tone that was firm yet friendly. "I'm the CEO of a consulting firm here in Chicago. I'm certain your presence would make a difference there, just like it did in my life. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. One moment she was on the verge of leaving Chicago. The next she stood before an unexpected opportunity, a new job, a chance to start over. Michael's offer echoed in her mind as she tried to absorb every detail. This man whom she had saved, and with whom she felt an unexplainable connection, was now inviting her to a new beginning. And there, in the middle of the room, he held out his hand, waiting for her answer. After a few seconds of silence, Sarah shook his hand with a shy smile. "I accept, Michael," she said, her heart beating faster. In that moment, her life seemed to be taking an unexpected turn, and for the first time in weeks she felt a spark of hope ignite within her. "Great," Michael replied, his face showing a relieved smile. "We'll start next week. But first, I want to make sure you're comfortable. I've been thinking, if you need a place to stay, we can take care of that too. I don't want you to have to go through any difficulties here in Chicago." Sarah felt both surprised and touched by Michael's generosity. He looked at her with a genuine expression of concern, and she knew this went beyond a simple act of gratitude. There was something more, a silent understanding between them, something she couldn't quite explain but felt deeply. In the days that followed, Sarah started working alongside Michael at his company. At first, everything felt like a challenge. She had to quickly adapt to the new routine and learn about the corporate world, something that had always seemed distant and intimidating to her. Michael, however, turned out to be an excellent mentor, patiently guiding her and giving her the support she needed. Each day, Sarah felt more confident and fulfilled, as if she were finally finding her place. Her interactions with Michael became more frequent and intense. They had lunch together, discussed projects, and occasionally shared personal stories about their lives. Michael would talk about his childhood, his struggles in building the company, and Sarah listened intently, fascinated to discover the deeper layers of this reserved man. One evening, after a long day of work, Michael invited her to dinner at a quiet restaurant by Lake Michigan. The night was cold, and a thin mist covered the city, making the setting even more inviting. Sitting across from each other, with the lake reflecting the city lights, Sarah and Michael talked like old friends. "I never imagined my life would take this direction," Sarah confessed, looking at him with a mix of gratitude and admiration. "When I saw you on that sidewalk, all I wanted was to help, never imagining it would lead us here." Michael looked at her tenderly, his eyes reflecting the same connection that Sarah felt. "I didn't imagine it either," he replied softly, as if reflecting on everything that had happened up to that moment. "But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that life surprises us when we least expect it. And honestly, I don't think I've ever felt as grateful as I did that day when you decided to save me." The silence that followed was full of meaning, and Sarah felt her heart race. She realized that over the days she'd spent by Michael's side, something new had been born between them. It wasn't just gratitude or admiration, it was something deeper, a feeling she could no longer ignore. The evening unfolded in an atmosphere of shared warmth and emotion. They laughed, shared stories, and looked at each other as if time had stopped, as if the world outside no longer mattered. At the end of the dinner, as they strolled slowly along the lake's edge, Michael stopped, gazing at Sarah with an intense light in his eyes. "Sarah, I don't want this to sound impulsive," he began, hesitant, "but I need to be honest. I feel something very special for you, something beyond gratitude. Ever since you stayed by my side in the hospital, it's like something in me awakened. You brought light to a part of my life I didn't even know I needed." Michael's words enveloped her like warmth, and Sarah realized she felt the same. Taking a deep breath, she looked at him, her eyes shining with an intensity that mirrored her own feelings. "Michael, I feel the same way," she admitted, her voice trembling but full of sincerity. "From the very beginning, I felt there was something special between us. You've become such an important part of my life, in a way I never expected." Without saying anything more, Michael moved closer, and the two shared a gentle, promise-filled kiss, sealing what they both knew was the start of a new journey. The relationship between Sarah and Michael grew like a shy flame, but one that gained strength with each passing day. The romance that began with a kiss by the edge of Lake Michigan transformed into something more intense and profound, as they grew closer and trusted each other more deeply. Amid long conversations and shared laughter, they found an unexpected peace, something rare in their lives until then. Sarah, Michael's love was something new, a healing, rejuvenating experience. After so much uncertainty and loss, she finally felt that she had found someone who supported her and encouraged her to be her best self. Michael, on the other hand, saw in Sarah not only the woman who had saved him, but someone who understood him in a way no one else did. He, who for years had carried on a solitary routine, focused solely on work, now found beauty in the small things, in the simplicity of a shared laugh or a comfortable silence. One quiet evening, Michael invited her to dinner at his home. Nervous, Sarah prepared carefully, her heart racing at the thought of an intimate evening with just the two of them, free from the formality and barriers of work. Upon arriving, she was greeted by the gentle warmth of Michael's home, softly lit by candles and decorated to feel cozy and inviting. Over dinner, they shared dreams and memories, and Michael told her something he had never shared with anyone before. "You know, Sarah, a few years ago, I almost lost faith in people after some painful experiences. But you changed everything. Your courage and compassion made me believe again." Michael's voice was filled with emotion, and Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears as she listened. She took his hand across the table, a simple gesture, but one rich with meaning. "Michael, you've given me so much more than you realize. I was lost, without direction, and finding you was like discovering a new path, a new life," she confessed, not hesitating, feeling that with him she could be completely honest. Dinner ended, but the night still held surprises. Michael led her out to the balcony, where they could see the city lights. "There's something I wanted to give you," he said, taking a small box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate silver ring with a light blue stone. It wasn't a formal proposal, but a symbol of what he wanted to build with her. "Sarah," he began, holding her hand tenderly, "this ring represents the commitment I want to make to you. Not a commitment of empty promises, but of building something real, of being together and facing whatever comes. I know we came together in ways no one expected, but I want you to know that this feeling is the truest thing I've ever felt." With tears in her eyes, Sarah slipped the ring on her finger and drew closer, hugging him tightly. In that quiet moment, they understood that from that point forward, they would be side by side, supporting each other and learning together. The cold of Chicago didn't matter, as the warmth of that embrace seemed enough to keep them both warm. The day dawned bright in Chicago. Spring was in full bloom, and the scent of cherry blossoms filled the air, making that Saturday even more unforgettable. Sarah and Michael had chosen a secluded spot in a garden overlooking Lake Michigan, where they planned to marry under the soft evening light, surrounded only by their closest friends and family. As Sarah walked down the aisle in a light dress with her hair delicately pinned up, Michael could barely contain his emotions. In that moment, everything around them seemed to fade away. It was just him and the woman who had changed his life so profoundly. He looked at her with admiration and gratitude, remembering each detail that had brought them to this moment: the chance meeting, the rescue, the challenges, and finally the love. Standing before her, Michael took a deep breath, his eyes shining as he began his vows. "Sarah, you were the most beautiful and unexpected surprise life could have given me. The love I feel for you is unlike anything I've ever known. Today, I promise to be your safe harbor, your friend, your partner, and to build a life that will always be worthy of us." Sarah felt her heart warm and tears filled her eyes as she replied, "Michael, you brought color and purpose to my life. You showed me that, even in the most unlikely circumstances, love can transform everything. I promise to be by your side every step of the way, with love, loyalty, and the certainty that with you, I have found my home." They exchanged rings with trembling hands, and in a gentle kiss sealed what both knew would be the beginning of a new story. Thank you for following this story through to the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories we post almost daily. And if you're looking for more tales of love and resilience, there are plenty waiting for you in the links here on the screen. See you next time.